So, we are going to talk about how long burnout and chronic stress lasts and when you should just push through and when it's time to really do something serious about it. So, one of the things that I think is reasonable for people to think is that life is full of ups and downs, and it's normal to experience seasons of stress, whether that's in our career or with, following a loss or certain times of the year. And we don't always need to have clinical intervention for something that's hard for us, right? So my name is Rochelle Walsh. If you're new to me, I've been a complex trauma therapist for many, many years. I have a lot of advanced training in complex trauma, advanced EMDR, and I now work with people in an entirely new and different way because I've just found that it's far more helpful and aligns more with my own beliefs as well as how I've seen people heal. So with chronic stress, we're talking about something that isn't just related to a certain season of life. Now, can a certain season of life lead to something that's more chronic? So we have acute stress. Like acute stress might be something where, we're going through a divorce or we're going through a really stressful job season or problem in our marriage, or we just lost someone and there's something that's happened and it really has, we're feeling the impact of stress. We may be going through having some anxiety around it or depression around it, or depressed mood, not depression, but depressed mood. We might feel more irritable on edge. And we just know that, that it's a hard life circumstance. And during that time, we want to do things like really self-care, lean into our faith, do things to manage the stress as we go along. But with an acute situation, we should notice a progression of things getting easier. But sometimes what happens, most of the time, I think what happens is that when people are really feeling frustrated with things, what they've noticed is that even though they quit the job or they move into a different season, or now the kids are bigger, or this stressor has, been relieved, that their emotional state doesn't altogether change, that this stress response has become chronic. So it's not just something that's acute. It really has to do with what's going on in the nervous system, and that stress response has been, really memorized in the brain and the body and the response patterns, and they can feel like they're in an emotional Groundhog Day. So it's like wherever I go, there I am, and so even though that season has passed, they can look back and say, well, I guess I've always been kind of a type A person, or I've always been somewhat of a worrier, and they wonder why now all of a sudden is it impairing my sleep, or am I feeling like the weight of it? And so I really like to talk about the fact that chronic stress in our nervous system does not stay static. It does not stay the same. So the fight or flight response, really good for getting out of danger, is an inflammatory response. So when I say inflammatory, it means like, think about if you injured your elbow or something, and all of a sudden, it swells up and the blood goes there, and it's protective in nature. So it's going to inflame that area, put a lot of blood there to help it heal, protect it, swell up to protect it. And so the stress response is inflammatory and it's protective, and it's really good for getting through a hard time, an injury, a crisis. But when that is left in the on position, it becomes very toxic, very unhealthy for our body, impacts us in many ways. So for instance, the stress response will cause our stomach to stop digesting, right? Because all the energy, the blood flow goes to our arms and legs to get us out of danger, and we don't digest food. Again, very helpful if you're needing to run away from danger. But on a chronic state, a chronic stress response, then, not digesting our food properly, we get gut permeability, right? Or gut disturbance. And then our gut and brain, there's a two-way connection. So then when we're having a lot of gut issues, IBS or ulcers or constipation or tummy aches, what happens, food sensitivities, when our gut is not right, it sends a danger signal to the brain, and the brain goes, oh no, everything's, we're in danger, things aren't right. So there's a two-way connection. So the stress response, when I say it doesn't stay static, it's because as it goes on, the longer it's in place, the more areas of the body it starts attacking. It attacks our relationships because we're not able to be as present. Maybe we start to conserve energy. We start withdrawing a little bit. It can impact our finances because maybe the stress response, exacerbates fear and doesn't allow us to move forward confidently in our profession, or we get sick and we can't perform as well. So we have days missed from work. So I always tell people it's like thinking about a pebble in your shoe. That pebble that's in your shoe and you're walking in it and it's irritating you. It might be very tiny, right? And maybe if you took it out right then, there's really no danger from it. You can withstand it, right? It's uncomfortable, but you take the pebble out, you move on, and you're good to go. But let's say the same pebble in the same place, in the same shoes, rubbing on the same area, year after year after year, eventually you get an abscess, you get, you can get infection. Of course, when we do that, we'd stop and take the pebble out of our shoe, right? With stress, people think I can handle the pebble in my shoe, right? I've learned to deal with it. I'm capable. I'm resilient. So they keep pushing through and pushing through and pushing through. And all of a sudden, now it's impacting, I'm grinding my teeth and I'm not sleeping well and my body feels constantly on edge and I can't get out of my head. And so I'm having to do other things, maybe step back from a position or, make excuses not to go to a social thing, or I'm not really present when I'm there. It's just kind of zapping the joy and zapping the energy because over time, the stress doesn't stay the same. It starts to impact us in more and more ways. And so if something is acute, we should look at, okay, has the situation passed? How long has it been, right? If I say, if you're in a stress response and you say, how long has this been? And it's more than six months, more than a year, more than 3 years, more than 5 years, 20 years. And you can look back and say, well, maybe that stress response that had me feeling like I had to be perfect in college or, stressing over exams and never, had always a fear of failure. Now, 20 years later, when I'm 40, looks and feels much different. It's not that you are weaker. Well, I guess you are weaker, not because you're weaker in character, but your body becomes worn down from the stress and those patterns become more and more entrenched. So if we can see that an event happens, the stress response is activated because it's a very hard life event, but we can see continuous growth moving forward and it's getting better and our body is metabolizing that and our mind is healing from that. Then just be persistent, lean in with faith, lean in with good self-care, do the things that you know to do and watch yourself progress and heal. But if you realize that you've been stuck and that you seem to be stuck even when things are good, right? That tells you this is an internal thing. This is not an acute situation that's just based on what's going on in my environment. And it's really important sooner rather than later to fix that because these nervous system patterns become embedded. Even though they're embedded the same and they keep repeating on autopilot, the consequences become much more with the longer that it goes on. So that's my explanation of acute versus chronic stress and when it's time to get help. And that would be if it's something that is present in multiple situations, if it's become kind of like how I operate, if you're noticing the physical symptoms in your body, if you're not having a steady progression of healing after a life event, it is time to get help, and there's nothing wrong with that. I always tell people, the people that I help are not any different than other people. Chronic stress, anxiety is the most prevalent mental health condition that there is. They are not exceptional because they have anxiety. They're exceptional because they raise the standard and choose that it's not something they're willing to live with. They want to live more fully in their purpose as healthy mentally, physically, and emotionally possible because they know it has a huge bearing on how they show up in their lives and their careers and their families, what they pass on to their kids and the legacy they leave. So that's what makes them exceptional. So I hope this was helpful. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.